The war leader wanted nothing more than to retire. However, his expertise with dealing with the humans was considered invaluable. However, this was mainly giving advice on why dealing with humans is such a bad idea and that they should never hire them. Ever. However, nothing can stop that now. The war leader found out that the new warlike species had entered the arena of space itself, and before anyone knew it, two of the species that were on the opposite side of human territory had either been annihilated or forced into slavery. This new species had made it known that they will not ever negotiate. There will never be peace talks. It is their divine right, as they say, to enslave all those that do not willingly submit. He knew this. It was the old-fashioned surrender or die, or sometimes both from what he was hearing. The remnants of both species had run into his territory and his enemy's territory. They were looking for some sort of sanctuary, anything, because they were down to barely a fifth of their original numbers, and what was left was definitely not able to fight. The old, the young, the infirm, anything, as they begged for any type of sanctuary. The two warring governments, the first one to ever negotiate with humans, and of course the second, both denied them straight to their face. They claim that all materials are to be used to build up fleets and train their soldiers and sailors, and not for refugees. They just didn't have the ability to house them, to clothe them, to feed them. They were sent to the next closest territory to beg for assistance. However, both of the species took a collective sigh as they realized the next one in line was human territory. As each of these species that had begged for sanctuary went into human territory, neither side heard anything. Nothing. It was just emptiness in the void. They believed that they wouldn't be able to survive, and both sides had a collective thought. I can only hope that their end was quick. When the new enemy entered their territories, both factions sent everything they had able to fight the enemy, and they did to a standstill. They believed they would be able to hold out and stop the enemy where it was and be able to hold their territory. Then they saw the enemy heading towards human territory. They warned them collectively, "Danger! Danger! You're in trouble!" They got a reply, "We'll be fine." They then offered ships and personnel to the humans, at great cost, of course. As both sides, they believed that they would be able to get a hold of human weaponry, human ships, and all that, even though humanity was a relatively small and backwater race compared to both of them. They knew that humanity had some special toys they wanted to get. The response back was, "Nah, thanks. We're good." They both believed that humans were insane. How could they possibly fight against an enemy like that when they only have a few dozen sectors? Not only that, but both of these forces that are protecting themselves have close to 100 sectors apiece. Do they think they can hold? The humans don't have nearly enough resources to do this. How could they possibly? It took the combined fleets of all sectors of both of these aggressors to stop the advance of their new enemy. The humans think they can do it alone? They both agreed that pride and arrogance was going to get the humans annihilated. Yet they had a bigger issue, holding the line. 2.5 solar rotations later, they were losing. Both of the former enemies are not doing well at all. Both are crying for help. And surprisingly, the humans answered. They believed they had been saved. The humans then stated their price. The speed in which they immediately brought up the price was ludicrous. What's even worse was the actual price. Humans want entire sectors as payment. Sectors from both sides. They offered the humans ships and trade routes, anything, but the humans claim they have been underpaid for previous jobs. A few outdated components and a single decommissioned ship as payment to take an entire planet or sector? That was insane and insulting. They would end everything with, "We know our price." They both tried to negotiate, tried to stall for time, anything to make sure they didn't lose out so much. But they did not have time on their side as the enemy began to push so hard that they began to attack their core worlds. And then, very begrudgingly, they agreed to the price. The lawyers stepped in and the contracts were signed, and of course, both sides were not happy. One of which was quoted as saying, "You had better be worth it, you evil hairless monkeys." Within 70 human hours, the first ships appeared. Using hit and run tactics, they sent the enemy formations into disarray. New gravity control system, gravimetric engines, turret-mounted particle cannons, advanced point defenses, electronic countermeasures, and the fact that they were beyond aggressive lunatics by universal standard helped them to survive, being outnumbered over 400 to 1 sometimes. The enemy was in chaos from the human corvettes and destroyers that streaked in and immediately got within their formation, firing their guns in all different directions. They didn't understand what was going on until something very, very large arrived. Wait, it's not just one. Many somethings big just showed up on their sensors, and as their sensors screamed warnings, they believed that these were just warnings from the corvettes and the destroyers coming through. The human battleships that just jumped out of their warp space wasted absolutely no time in ravaging the enemy lines and formations as those destroyers and corvettes immediately broke formation and ran for it as they did not want to get caught up in the middle of this. The defenders were absolutely flabbergasted as they could not figure out how in the ever-loving hells were humans so accurate with such large weapons at such a large distance. I mean, humans have always had the best targeting, but this, with every shot, they had taken one out. How could they get through the electronic warfare systems? How could they? Oh, crap. That's when they realized. They realized that the absolute chaos that the corvettes and destroyers were doing was not just to break the lines. They were targeting the electronic warfare vessels, those that were specifically designed to make sure that you could not target ships at maximum range. This allowed for precision shots from the battleships, where every single time they fired even one of their particle projection cannons, they struck the target within just a few moments. This was forcing the enemy to retreat from all battles wherever the humans came in. And once space was cleared, the drop would commence, and it was just brutal. Many of the species tried to figure out exactly another word for it, but there was no other way. It was just brutal. Energy weapons sliced through buildings and personnel, baking holes in all of them as some of them were brought across as though they were some sort of energy blade, slicing parts off, the ballistic weapons being fired over and over again, causing parts to be ripped off, in some cases causing entire heads, torsos to explode. Flame and plasma was sprayed all through buildings and any type of opening, causing many of those defenders inside to simply scream and run, partially ablaze as the adherent fuel just continued to burn, sometimes cooking them to the point where their eyeballs simply exploded in their head as they screeched in pain. And then, if they ran out of bullets, if they ran out of energy, if they ran out of plasma to use, they would use a simple sharpened spike. There was never any survivors. As the former enemy's defense fleets came up to the humans during all this, they began to ask a bunch of questions, and one of which was, "Why did you bring a dreadnought to the front lines?" We didn't. Yet. Yet? Yeah. Wait, 16 seconds. 16 seconds later, a huge warp signature just seemed to open up, And what they saw just amazed them. A flat planet, basically, jumped into sensor range. It was absolutely gargantuan. The wingspan of this easily stretched one of their lunar satellites wide. They couldn't believe this. How could the humans come up with this? This was what they considered a dreadnought? Then they looked close and they could see massive cannons that were even larger than those that were on the battleships. That was not just the interesting part. They also began to dock damaged ships to the dreadnought, and they seemed to be pulled inside. What was this thing? It just floated by, accepting more and more damaged ships without even pausing, and just silently drifted through space. It got to the front lines, and they were absolutely astounded as they realized that humans' version of a dreadnought was actually a floating battle station. This caused many of them to simply gasp. The defenders could not believe what they were seeing through their eye stalks. More and more human ships came in, many of them in groups, some in pairs, but they were never alone. They began to link up with their respective battle groups. Then they seemed to split into different other sections and then jumped away. This left all of those who watched the humans fight ask, "What the hell did I just see?" Across the entire line, human ships laid waste to any enemy ships, fleets, or stations they came across. Humans would take planets with ruthless efficiency, making sure not to damage the slave population if they could help it. However, this was sometimes something that couldn't be avoided, and when they had to break hardened positions, they would use a strange weapon that seemed to be a directed energy type of situation, and they would simply shake the planet until all bunkers, all hardened defenses would crumble as though they were built on sand. As before, those that ran away were allowed to simply withdraw. It seemed the humans didn't care. As long as they weren't targeted, they just let those who ran leave. Humans continued their movement. Though there was not as many ships as they would like, they were unbelievably powerful. They were able to clear sector by sector, fleet by fleet, planet by planet, satellite by satellite, continent by continent, and city by city. They continued this unrelenting march as they continued all the way. Humans overran everything on their way through, never stopping. However, they would consistently change their battle plans, and no one knew what the humans were going to do. It seems as though they were able to adjust tactics as they were moving. This was unheard of. No wonder they're so efficient. This scared the enemy to the point where they were abandoning territory, and it wasn't long before the enemy was out of friendly territory. As a recovery fleet arrived from those that had contracted the humans, the admiral told them that their job was done and they'd be leaving soon. They had completed the contract, of course. Friendly species began to beg. They began to try and deal with the humans, cut a deal to go and face the enemy, make them perish, push them all the way back away from their borders as far as they could. The humans decided to deal. They decided to deal for additional sectors, though these ones surprised everyone. These were not mineral-rich sectors. In some cases, there was only one or two satellites around their own star. They were confused. Why those? Though they didn't have time to even worry about it. There was the threat that humans would simply withdraw. This would leave them open for another assault, and they just couldn't handle it. Their shipbuilding was absolutely trashed by this point, so they signed away the sectors. Upon the signing and the, of course, formalities that go along with it, the humans sent a message, a broadband message to all the enemy forces. Leave occupied space. Return to your original borders. We are coming to reclaim territory you have taken by conquest. If you leave, we will not follow you back to your homeworld. If you insist on fighting us over territory you have taken via conquest, we cannot guarantee your species' survival. The friendly units were confused as 90% of the human fleets began to head into enemy-held territory. They were freaking out and demanded to know why the humans left against the deal, but humanity responded that they did not fail to uphold their end of the deal. Human ships still remain. They just have another contract to fill as well. Very soon you would see other ships from species that everyone thought dead. Species that they refused to help. They had somehow survived. The humans hadn't killed them. This was amazed, but this also made the friendly species a little pissed. Why would the humans go help a conquered species? Although they couldn't force the humans to keep their armada around as they quadruple checked the contract. And everyone said the same thing. Fracking human lawyers. The enemy was smart enough to pull back and save themselves. They realized in the data packet that was sent with the message there was a map that showed the territories of before their initial invasion into known space, and they decided to cut their losses. To everyone's surprise, they actually came to the table to sign a peace treaty. They did not want to lose anymore. The humans in attendance were always flanked by the species that they returned to their home systems. One of them looked like a cross between a long-haired house cat and a woodchuck with webbed feet, and the other is strikingly human with different colored skin, usually a bright color. Though mammalian, those horns and that short tail was a big giveaway that they weren't human. Not to mention they tend to be thinner and generally shorter than humans, but they never wanted to be away from their saviors for very long. With all the paperwork signed, it was easy to finally see what the humans were after. They could see that the sectors that the humans wanted cut right between the two original species at war. The first to ever contract humanity, and the second. Aside from having a go-between between these two sectors, it also connects human territory to their new allies, the ones that they had saved, the ones that they had taken in, and now were able to take their territory back. Their new, as the humans called them, buddies. It was a strange and almost helic path, which allows freedom of movement beyond any prying eyes if they want to move any military assets. It was also a safe zone for any cargo to be moved, though there was only one sector where the humans would actually have to go in between sectors, which is not exactly safe and not exactly fun, but if anyone's going to do it, it's the humans. At the very end of the ceremony, the human speech caught everyone's attention. Clearing his throat, the admiral would motion each time he addressed one of them, addressing the first two being the first two species to actually contract with the humans. Then moving on to the two that they saved, and finally going to their former enemies. Though even though there might be some bad blood, they try to keep things as cordial as possible. With the conclusion of this conference, let the cannons be silent. I understand that our new territory is a concern, as it separates the species known as the schmucks and the species known as the wankers, with only a small corridor in which you can both fight over. Understand that this is a calculated decision, as though we humans are a little good at warfare, so to speak. We do tire of it eventually, though I have no doubt that in the future there will be another threat. This new transit route will allow us to not only keep you from needlessly killing each other, but will allow trade with our new allies. He opened his arms to motion to his new friends on his right and left. The French and the Polacks. It is our hope that with us close by, They will no longer have to face the difficulties they have in the recent times. Though thanks to them being intermediaries, we can now have peaceful dealings with this council's newest member, the HFY. He then waved to the former aggressor, sitting almost defiant as he listened. Let this new era begin. And remember, if you wish to hire us again, do not hesitate to call. The humans all left shortly afterwards, as they had held up their end of the deal after all, and all they wanted to do was return to their space, to their seclusion as they had done before. They actually did hire the humans again, but this time it was the entire council, as they chose humans as their security detail. It cost them a lot. However, there was never any issues with a human around. Well, there is no issues except for the one that many species cannot explain. Though it violates no contract, none of the species can figure out the human sense of humor. Many of the humans will always sit there and burst out in this strange yipping cough that they call laughter every time a video is played from the war. A simple video. On the image, it appears as though one of the humans, what did they call them again? Drop born soldier, something like that. It's difficult to understand the human idiom sometimes. Yet it looks as though this one warrior had taken down dozens, if not 100, of the enemy at once. Yet he was standing amongst them as one of his own walks up and says, "You did great." And the other one simply turns and says, "Great? I'm surrounded by assholes."